The New Orleans Saints roster cuts have started to trickle in, and so far, the Saints have made a little over 20 cuts. Now, to start off the list, I'm just going to go through every player who has been released by the New Orleans Saints. But really quick reminder, we are going to be giving you a full breakdown of the 2024 initial depth chart in New Orleans here later today. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Welcome into Saints Now. My name is Trace Girouard. Thank you so much for tuning in. So let's start off with the first name that is the most important name, in my opinion, running back Kendre Miller. He's actually been placed on IR. Now, this means that the New Orleans Saints cannot have him play, so I think that Jordan Mims will make the roster as the running back 3. For Kendre Miller, I could expect the New Orleans Saints to place him on the the injured reserve list with a designation to return. The NFL has a new rule this year where 2 players can be designated to return from the injured reserve list. Now let's go through the other player added to the IR. It's Camron Peterson, a defensive tackle who was recently brought into New Orleans. I'm not sure he's going to be on the list that's designated to return, but nonetheless, he is placed on the injured reserve list. So Lou Hedley, the punter, has been released, meaning Matt Hayball, the rookie out of Vanderbilt, the player that the Saints brought in as an undrafted free agent, won the punter battle. Now Charlie Smyth, he also got cut, meaning that Blake Grupe won the kicker battle. I do believe with Charlie Smyth, he will be back on the Saints practice squad because if a team were to add him to their roster, it would need to be to the 53-man roster, the active game day roster. So if a team wants to add him as the extra international pathway player spot, they can't do that. They have to add Charlie Smyth to the active roster. So I think that Charlie Smyth will stick around in New Orleans. I think he has a bright future in the NFL, but so far it's going to be Blake Grupe as your starting kicker. Roderic Teamer, the safety, has been released. Isaiah Stalbird, Mike Rose, those are both linebackers who have been released. Running backs James Robinson and Jacob Kibodi also both have been released. Offensive lineman Jesse Davis, defensive back Ugo Amadi, cornerback Joejuan Williams, offensive lineman Tremayne Anchrum, offensive lineman Kyle Hergel, offensive lineman and 7th round pick Josiah Ezirim has been released, but I do believe he is a top player to bring back just based off of the size and the qualities that he has. I think that he is a player that should return to the practice squad. Lawrence Johnson, a safety, he was also released. Shemar Jean-Charles, this was an interesting move for me because he was actually getting a lot of run in New Orleans with the first team. Now, we also saw Jack Heflin, the defensive tackle, get waived. Mark Evans, an offensive lineman who's been around the Saints for now 2 seasons, has been waived. Millard Bradford, the TCU safety and undrafted free agent, has been waived. Michael Jacobson, a tight end. Shane Lemieux, an offensive guard. And the most recent, Jonathan Abram, a safety who, if my memory serves me correctly, was a first-round pick just a few years ago by the Las Vegas Raiders. So with Jonathan Abrams, this tells me that the Saints a first-round pick back in 2019, the 27th overall selection. Now, this tells me that the Saints are confident in Jordan Howden, but I'm not necessarily sold that they're not going to go and be spenders to maybe bring in a safety that has been released. I'm excited for Jordan Howden. I think he's going to be a good player, but I also do think that Jonathan Abram, being that he was a practice squad player last year, got bumped up to the active roster after the Marcus May injury. We could see Abram on the field at some point this season. Now, really quickly, I need you to get down in the comment section and share your thoughts. Of the 20-plus names that we went through, who was the most surprising cut in your opinion? I want you to get down in the comment section, share your thoughts, and let me know. So a few players that have not been announced and there hasn't been any news quite yet. We're going to go down this list. Jeff Nowak put out this list, and I actually think it's a really good talking point here. Now, linebacker Andrew Dowell, we haven't heard any news around him. That's the same thing with wide receiver Shaq Davis, who the Saints brought in last year as an undrafted free agent. He spent the season on the practice squad. The Eagles signed him. They waived him. and the Saints brought him back. So interesting to see what'll happen there. Rico Payton, a cornerback, an undrafted free agent out of Pittsburgh State. I have to tell you guys, I am so hopeful that he makes the 53-man roster because he has been incredibly impressive, not just in the preseason, but at practices as well. John Hendricks, Ross Jackson, Nick Underhill, all of them have been posting a lot of praise towards Rico Payton. So I think that he is yet another diamond in the rough that Dennis Allen has been able to sniff out in the undrafted free agent class. And the fact that Rico Payton has made it thus far without having any sort of designation as to whether or not he's been cut or the Saints are keeping him, I think that it's a hopeful outlook for the rookie. Now, wide receiver Samson Nacua, who most notably had that 106-yard kick return, the almost kick six against the Tennessee Titans to round out the first half in preseason week 3. Samson Nacua, maybe he does make the roster. In my initial roster projection, I did not have him making the 53-man roster. I had him brought back as a practice squad player, but I could also see with the New Orleans Saints them deciding to keep Samson Nacua, because of the lack of depth in the wide receiver room. I like Chris Olave, I like A.T. Perry, I like Rashid Shaheed, but after that, there's a pretty noticeable drop-off. I think Cedric Wilson will make the roster. I think Equanimous St. Brown also will make the roster, and that is a player who we're still hearing to see what happens with him. And I also do believe that Bub Means will make the roster as well. He's been dealing with some injuries. It's been kind of slow in terms of what we've seen from him in the preseason, but he's a player that has really nice size and nice athletic traits. Now, a couple other names I want to talk about here. Not Kendre Miller. We already talked about him. Dallin Holker, the tight end. For him to make the roster, it would be a really, really big deal. Because right now, how I see it, I think that the Saints are going to carry 3 tight ends. The first one, Juwan Johnson. The second one, Foster Moreau. And the third one, Taysom Hill. And I understand that Taysom Hill is not just a tight end. He is not just an offensive player. He's not even just a football player. He's literally the best football player, in my opinion, in the National Football League. If you're talking about players that are all around good at the sport of football, not many are beating out Taysom Hill. So for Dallin Holker to make the roster, I think it would be very telling to what his skill set is, and it would be a testament to what he could provide to the Saints offense. He's been dealing with a minor injury as well. We didn't get to see him active in preseason week 3, but I am very hopeful for Dallin Holker. I was surprised that he didn't actually get drafted, but just a couple other names that I want you to keep your eyes out for. Khaleke Hudson, the linebacker. Rookie Jalen Ford out of Texas, a 5th-round selection. He's a linebacker to keep your eyes on. And on top of that, I'm going to give you guys an interesting name. Watch out for, I'm trying to pick one of these guys on this list, Mason Tipton. Mason Tipton is another wide receiver who we haven't heard anything on yet, and we're waiting to see whether or not he is going to be a practice squad player, whether or not the Saints are going to add him to the 53-man roster, because he started off red hot this summer. And then once we got close to the preseason, we weren't really able to see much from him due to injuries. So again, we just went through a bunch of cuts, gave you guys some quick analysis and some quick thoughts about what the Saints have done so far on roster cutdown day. We still have a handful of moves to come later today, so be sure to subscribe. We're going to give you a full breakdown of all the roster cuts, the players placed on IR, and then we're going to go through the 53-man depth chart in the video later today. So be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications. And Saints fans, y'all stay golden. We will see you next time.